every word I said was around 7.4 euro, or about 182 pesos. Say that we speak at a rate of about 120 words per minute on average. That means that 1 minute of me talking was worth around 889 euros, or 21,862 pesos. If I spoke for 6 minutes with 3 different people, that means that I spoke for a duration of 18 minutes. Now, using our previous calculations, we know that 1 minute is 889 euros, so that makes these 18 minutes 16,000 euros, or around 400,000 pesos. Now you can tell why this interview was so monumental to me, and why it was so important that I got my one chance right. Well, I'm happy to announce that I did in fact get the scholarship, but before celebrating, let's see what I said during these 18 minutes that made them give me this scholarship. Hey there, my name is Emiliano, and I really love showing you my journey from the IB through my gap year towards med school. Now for context, I got this email saying that it was going to be 3 different MMI-like stations. Now MMI stands for multiple mini interview, and honestly I don't think that was very accurate, but anyway, what I did was prepare for all the different kinds of stations that are in MMIs, because I didn't know which one I was going to have. What I did know was that I had 10 minutes with 3 doctors, so 10 minutes per doctor, where I would be given a scenario and I would have to comment on it. And honestly, it went better than I thought it was gonna go. So let's break down the first scenario. This is the actual scenario that they used, and these are the actual questions that they asked me, and these are my actual answers. The way I managed to get this was that as soon as I was done with the 30 minutes, I devoted around 30 more minutes to writing down everything I could remember. The scenarios are verbatim. My answers are more or less what they were. Of course, since I was recalling this, it's not 100% accurate. And their questions, their follow-up questions are also around 90 or 85% accurate. Let's start with the first scenario. Oh, also, I was given 2 minutes to read this scenario. I'm gonna give you guys 15 seconds, so if you want more time, make sure to pause the video if you want to come up with your own answer. This is the scenario, and I'm gonna comment on the answers that I gave and the questions, but I'm not gonna read out my answers because then it would take forever. Let's begin with this scenario right here. So in this first answer, I was a bit nervous because it was the first one, and I felt like there was a correct answer, but at the same time, I knew there wasn't, but I felt like there was. So I messed up, and this answer wasn't the one that I should have given. I think at the very least, I should have explained why I should have let them finish and not just say, oh yeah, I would have let them finish the conversation. I should have gone a bit more in depth and said, okay, I would have let them finish to not escalate the situation or to not put myself in a situation that could potentially escalate or have negative consequences for myself. And then he asks me this follow-up question. And as soon as I hear this follow-up question, I know that I screwed up and that I did not give a satisfactory answer, at least to him. So this answer is giving me an out. It's giving me a chance to say, okay, you're right, I was wrong, and this is what I would do differently. But instead what I do when I answer this is that I double down on my answer and I give a reason as to why it was my answer, which is, I think, equally as valuable. So I admit that he's right. I can acknowledge that he is right and that I would feel bad if I was in the place of the student. But I'm also saying, all right, I would feel bad, but I could understand if they wanted to avoid that, putting themselves in that situation. So I'm giving a reason and I'm showing empathy. And then this was the question, and then this was the answer. And overall, I think this scenario was my weakest one, partially because I was caught off guard at the beginning. I was not expecting it to be something like this, even though I had prepared for role-playing or delivering bad news sort of situations while practicing the MMIs. It was between the nerves and the being caught off guard. I think this was my worst answer yet, but it was also, I want to say, the second easiest. I think the hardest is this one that was coming. So this scenario requires a lot of introspection, so to speak, and it requires a lot of self-questioning. If I hadn't thought of this beforehand, I think I would have been seriously stumped by this question, because it's a tough question if you're trying to come up with it on your feet, and especially if you only have around 2 minutes. So what I started to do was I started to weave a story with this answer. I started talking about my family and how most of them are doctors. I didn't know if this is the correct or the incorrect way to give this answer because I don't want her to think that I'm becoming a doctor because of my family. But at the same time, if I'm being honest and candid, then I don't see why it could hurt, especially because I know that I'm not going into medicine because of my family. And as long as I know that, I can convince her, especially by being truthful. So she asked me this question, what changed? And I give this answer. And I have one single big issue with this answer, one mistake that I made. And it's that I forgot to mention that I've also attended a hysterectomy. But I forgot to mention it, which is a big thing I regret, but it's fine because apart from that, this answer was great, if I do say so myself. Why was it great? Because I'm packing a lot of things and a lot of information that shines a positive light on me in one simple answer from one simple question. I'm talking about how I find meaning in medicine and how it's a meaningful career. I acknowledge the limitations of my experience with medicine to date. I know that it's not complete or that it's nowhere near what a good doctor or any doctor has with regards to experience, but then while acknowledging this limitation, I can say how I've addressed it, and then I can list the rest of my surgical experience. And that's really valuable because I'm saying, okay, this is what I've done. I know it's good. I know it's bad. I know why it's bad and I'm trying to change it. And this is how I've tried to change it. And that's really good, if I do say so myself. But then she had some more follow-up questions that I hadn't thought of yet and I hadn't come up with an answer yet. And this was her question. So I'm really proud of this answer too, because I came up with it relatively on the fly. But at the same time, once I thought about it afterwards, I was like, okay, that's really true. And I really feel like that is the truth. It's not something I just came up with that I don't even believe in. Because I think that a lot of people would think that delivering bad news is hard. Because I bet it is. I bet it's really hard and I bet it's a very harrowing experience for the first few times you do it. But I think that when you're dealing with human lives, even if you've never made a mistake, living in fear of making that mistake can be much worse and much harder than actually making that mistake. It's like the anticipation is worse than the actual event of making a mistake and doing something wrong. And so dealing with human lives, that fear of doing something wrong must be super hard to overcome. And I think I delivered this answer well because it would have been really easy for me to phrase it in a way that discredits other people. So saying, most people think this, but I am right because I know that it's this. And that's not what I wanted to say because that's not how I think, and I think everybody could have a valid answer and a different answer. So my aim with this answer was to highlight that I have a different perspective from other people without discrediting the perspective of other people and their experience and the fact that they might also be correct. And I think I accomplished that. Then this question threw me off guard because I had seen a practice question and I had avoided thinking this answer was a bit too cliche and I didn't want to think about it right then and I didn't actually think they were going to ask it to me. So this was my answer, and I'm sure that there's thousands of ways to answer this ranging from the best to the worst, and I'm not sure on which side of the spectrum my answer fell in. You can tell me in the comments what you think or what you would have answered. But honestly, I think both my weakness and my strength made me sound good, and they didn't make me stand out in a negative way, and maybe they didn't even make me stand out in a positive way, so to speak. But just not having your weakness overshadow your strength, and not having a strength so big and a weakness so small that the examiner thinks that you're bluffing or you're lying, I think was a win for me, especially because I actively avoided trying to answer this question thinking it would not come up. Now this next question took me by surprise. It's the admission that medicine is tough and then asking how I'm going to tackle it. And the first thing I have to say is that I'm really proud of myself for remembering that quote from the Young Samurai series by Chris Bradford. I really like the series and I really enjoyed that. I really like that I remember the quote because it's true. And my answer in of itself was good in my opinion because it aligns with things I've said before about being determined and being consistent and just taking things one step at a time. And honestly, I think it's a nice touch that I said that doing what I've been doing has been working for me, because it has. And it's also it's a good reminder to the fact that I've worked for it and things have been working for me, as in I've been successful doing what I've been doing, so I see no reason to change it, just to adapt and to continue to be persistent and consistent. So again, a really nice question that I think I managed to answer correctly. The third scenario, here it is, was interesting because I have been through a real life situation or scenario very similar to this one before. I almost laughed while I was reading it. So this question was funny, but it was also good because in my answer, I was able to more or less flex on my knowledge of the 4 pillars of medicine, which I had coincidentally researched the night before, and I managed to incorporate, I think, a few of them into this answer, which was good. It allowed me to show what I knew, basically. And the only thing that I wasn't happy with was how she picked up on that last phrase, so to speak, about how everything would come from this place of love that one has for their grandparents, etc. Because she asked me a follow-up question, and this was the question that she asked me. So it's the same question, just removing the grandfather and grandmother from the situation and just inserting 2 random old people. And this was my answer, and I just took it as a way on which I could expand what I just said, which is what I did. And I just said that I would treat them equally as I would my grandfather or grandmother, because they're both patients in the end and they're both autonomous, not trying to do any harm. Because of the justice principle or the justice pillar, I would have to treat them both equally anyway. And then very abruptly, it was over. And that concluded my interview. It was very abrupt, the ending. I was like, okay, thank you, bye. And that was it. I wasn't quite sure how I had done. I was hoping I had done well, but I wasn't really sure. And that was a bit nerve-wracking for the time that they took to announce the scholarship, which was I think a few weeks. But I was so relieved and happy when I actually got it. It was a huge bonus and it made me happy for days. You can check out the rest of my journey on the scholarship in particular in this playlist over here. Thank you guys for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, etc. And see you guys next week.